Let just a couple more. And I see you in the waiting room. We will get ready to get started. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Jocelyn Johnson. It's a pleasure to be able to share with you all today. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you all. I still hear a couple of people popping into the waiting room, so I'm going to wait just one moment, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. During this session, I encourage you, if you have questions that come up, to feel free to put them in the chat. I love to make this conversational as much as possible. If I don't get to it right away, I will definitely circle back to it as well. So just please know you're welcome to jot down questions along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and get started first by sharing just a little bit about me and my background. Again, my name is Jocelyn Johnson, and I work here at the University of Michigan for the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. I have the privilege of being able to oversee something called the Opportunity Hub. And the Opportunity Hub is a combination of an integrative learning center and a transformational career exploration center for LSA students that's focused on increasing access to different opportunities and helping out with students' professional development. In addition to the work that I do here at the University of Michigan, I also am a coach and a consultant. So I do coaching as it relates to career coaching, even life coaching as well. You'll see on the side STEPS. STEPS is a program that's pretty near and dear to my heart. I previously worked with that program when I lived in the state of Texas, and it was a program that was helping individuals to transition off of welfare and to be able to have their own sustainability. And so that's a life coaching program that I helped with. I also do some executive coaching and more recently have started with the organization called Chief as a core guide for facilitation. And that's an organization that's focused on helping women who are in the C-suite to stay there, as well as making way for other women who are interested in that pathway. Professional development is also a bit of my background and makeup. A course that I currently teach for Stanford Continued Studies is around career, entitled What's Next? And it's about helping people to either pivot. So there's a lot of individuals that are mid-career or those that are launching into their career, and a handful that are at the encore. At the core of that, I'm focused on helping people to really reflect on what it is that's important to them, what are the skill sets and the things that they have along the way, and how can they make that successful launch or pivot in the direction that they want to go. I also am an early career transition researcher, mainly looking at emerging adulthood. And in this case, that's actually looking through all the way to 39. And so my dissertation focused on helping to understand what made a successful transition within early adulthood. And in this case, purpose ended up being a really important factor that came to the forefront. And so everything that I do, I'm always trying to find ways to help people to identify what's purposeful to them and connect with that because of knowing how important that role is. With consulting, I primarily do it with diversity, equity, and inclusion, focusing on organizations, with 3 other phenomenal women of color through a business called Elevate Equity Consulting. And then lastly, at the core, I am a higher ed professional from even when I was an undergrad student. So I've worked at Central Michigan University, a small liberal arts college called Midwestern State, Texas State University, Stanford, and now currently here at the University of Michigan. So why do I share these different pieces of my professional story? Because I think it's important to have an understanding of like the lens and understanding the why behind these different pieces, so that as I'm going through this presentation, you'll hear some things that connect to life coaching. You'll hear some things that are resources that I would use in a place like the Hub or with my Continued Studies course. But I want you to understand my background so that if certain questions come up along the way, you also know different spaces that I'm pulling from. And I really want to encourage you, as questions come up, to go ahead and jot them down, to put them in the chat, to let me know just what's on your mind. And again, since I won't be able to see everything all at once, I will be able to go back and look in the chat, and Vanessa's also going to help me along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. In today's session, I will be doing an overview of first just assessing where you are, spending some time in that space. I know like those practical steps and pieces, people love to jump to that, but I think like one of the most important things is setting that foundation. So I'm going to spend some time on that. Also, we'll talk about sponsorship, which is so important, especially when looking at the next steps you may want to take if there seems to be a barrier or information gap or just not having access to certain opportunities. So I'll spend some time talking through sponsorship, and then we'll go into like those details around the application, the interview process, questions that may come up. So that's just a quick overview of what we'll be covering collectively here today. So first, I want to spend some time on approaching your career with intention. And of all the things I'm going to talk about today, I just want you to remember this phrase, especially that you are the common denominator in every search process that you will have, every decision that you make, that you are the common denominator. And so as a result of that, your mindsets, your habits, how you approach things is immensely important. And I like to start in this space because it can be easy to just jump to, how do you get to that next opportunity? What will this phase look like? But in my work with coaching, in the courses that I've developed around this, the questions that come up, one of the things that has always just shined front and center is that your habits, the things that you do, they're going to go with you no matter where you are. And so if you can just really solidify in your mind that you are the common denominator, even though there will be certain barriers or there's certain things that can come up along the way, there are things about you that you can do from the very beginning that are going to help to set you up for success. Before we jump into some of the content, I want you to answer this question. You can answer it in the chat if you like. You can write it down where you are, but I want you to actually answer it, so that you can actually go back and look at it later. So why are you looking for your next opportunity? And if you're in a place right now that you may say, I'm not looking for a next opportunity just yet, still jot down what made you interested in coming to this session then. So I'm just going to give you like 2 minutes to write down, why are you looking for your next opportunity? And if you're not yet, what was it that drew you to this session? And feel free to drop it in the chat, or if it's personal, you can just write it down on a sheet of paper or type it wherever you are. Okay, I see some are coming in the chat. So if you like more connection with diverse individuals across the organization, it's awesome. Ayla. Still developing and learning your career pathway. This could help guide you. Awesome. Growth, very important. You like to do something you're passionate about, be a leader that makes impactful changes. It's amazing. You'd like to take all the things that you've experienced thus far to make a difference in the community, in the lives of the most vulnerable. Wow, Trina, you almost have a purpose statement right there. That's beautiful. Growth and meeting your own potential. Great tool to add to your toolbox, right? Not looking, but I like to take the opportunity to prepare. Very wise, very wise. I love that answer. Looking to grow, preparing for when you're ready. Growth, awesome, awesome. So I'm seeing a lot around growth, some feeling stagnant, Again, take the moment to write it down if you haven't, because this is good data. This is good data to learn about your motivation, your motivators. What's at the core of why you're thinking about your next opportunity. So I want you to pay attention to that and really look and reflect back on it when you have a chance to take a look deeper at what might be the underlying factor, what's motivating it. So the gift of self-awareness is really important when it comes to positioning yourself for your next opportunity, because it's foundational. And so it's twofold when we're talking about this, looking at understanding what are your different strengths. And we know there's different tools for that, different assessments that can help out, knowing what your core values are, having a grasp of your tendencies. This is really important, especially if one of the areas that comes up for you is around whether or not if certain challenges come up, how do you tend to lean into those challenges? Do you tend to be one that draws back more? Having a recognition of this and being like honest with yourself, taking an honest assessment of these different areas, understanding what have been some potential pitfalls. Sometimes people will count themselves out before an opportunity even comes by, not throwing their names in the hat. So actually taking some time to do some self-awareness, right? Evaluating why are you taking this next step is also another piece that's important, because it can give you information around, is it like a purpose-aligned decision that you're making? It was interesting, like I said, I even saw one that it showed up clearly, like the purpose piece and thinking about the next decision. Is it fear-based? This is a really important thing to ask yourself, because sometimes it doesn't show up really clear. It's something that can be hidden underneath the surface, but there can be fear that can be the driver for it. And what can happen is sometimes you can make a decision to want to go into that next opportunity because of it, whether it's dissatisfaction, which dissatisfaction can be a good sign if there's frustration to make a next move, but sometimes it can also cause very quick moves, right, without thinking certain things through, which could also lead to another position that also proves to be dissatisfying. So it's important to evaluate the why, to understand what are your motivators. Is it about timing? Because this will give you a clear picture of what foundation are you starting off with. And you want to get as close to purpose aligned as possible, timing aligned when making these types of decisions, just so that you don't find yourself in a place that doesn't really align with what you were hoping for to begin with. So these are just some foundational things to be thinking about as it relates to taking some of those next steps. Allison Felix is one of my absolute favorite Olympians. She's a track star. If you are not familiar with her, she has shared this post before with one of her favorite quotes. And while this one is more so about training, as you are thinking about the next opportunity that you are going to do, also recognize that in some way, shape, or form, it is going to stretch you. So it's going to require, though it's still you, a different version of you to some degree. So as you are thinking about this process, whether you're in the preparation phase or whether you already know what that is that you want to do, also take some time to look at what things will you need to do differently as you take those next steps. I know that sometimes there's this desire to go straight into the actual steps of the process, but I promise you, if you stop and do some of this reflection during this time and you answer some of these questions, it will give you more clarity. It will allow you to step into those next opportunities with even more precision. So these are some take-home resources as a follow-up that I'm going to provide to you that will also help with some of these areas, because I want you to be able to, actually take a deeper dive into some of these. So I will send to you an intention setting handout that will be helpful, a meaningful work kit exercise. And with the meaningful work kit, it has like your skill sets, core values, and the type of work environment you would want to be in that would help you to thrive. And it takes you through a process. It's a digital process, so I'll be able to share that resource to give you more clarity. And then there's a present future exercise. And if we end up having time, depends on the amount of questions that come through today, we may be able to actually do that during this session. So before I move into sponsorship and conversations around this, I just wanted to see if there's any questions or anything that's coming up based on just the first portion. And I'm loving these things that you all mentioned in the chat. I'm also going to go back and circle back on some of these as well. And so next I want to talk to you all about, and so some of you are just joining, I see that in the chat. So just to kind of center where we are, just really quick. First, I shared a little bit about my background, and the pieces that are most important is to understand that I come from a background that is DEI focused, that is also coaching focused, career, executive coaching, life coaching, and as well as having a background in higher education and professional development, teaching courses, continued studies courses around professional development. I shared those different pieces so that you understand the lens that I come to this work, but also so that you're able to bring different questions to me, that you know some of these different pieces of my background. Also, the very first portion that I started with is about how to really position yourself as it relates to your mindset and who you are for your next career opportunity. So it's really easy for us to want to jump right into like the application process, the next thing that we want to do. But one of the most important phrases and the thing that I always want people to remember is that you are the common denominator in every search, in everything that you do. And so the mindset, who you are, you bring into those roles. So recognizing and taking the time to do the deep reflection is extremely important. So I shared about some of the different things that you can do, things to think about, evaluate, and then the gift of self-awareness so that you recognize like, what are you taking into those next steps? Also ask the question about like, why are you here? Why are you interested in your next opportunity? And so I encourage you when you have a moment to take that time and just jot that down for yourself. And so you can use that as data to see what your underlying motivators are. So that's the quick piece of what I've talked about for all of you who have joined into this session due to the previous session being canceled. Thank you. So happy to have you here. And I hope that that summary was helpful. And so now we are going to jump into this next portion that is around sponsorship. Also, if you have questions that come up along the way, I really encourage you to be able to drop them into the chat because I love to be able to have conversation. I think that that's helpful. And if there's something that I can tailor to what you're talking about, I would love to be able to do that for you all. Okay, so we're going to pivot into sponsorship right now. And some of you may be familiar with sponsorship, some of you may not. So we're going to take some time to talk through this. But what's really important about this when thinking about your next opportunity is I know a lot of people get stuck in this place of where there's a gap, right? Or they don't have access maybe to that type of role or that environment that they're interested in. And so that can either put them in a place where they feel like they don't have the knowledge, or they just literally don't know how to actually get into those spaces. So sponsorship is really about access, right, to having social equity. So it is beyond mentorship. Mentorship is great, but sponsorship is taking it to the next level. So this quote, I think, does a wonderful job. So I'm going to read it just to help to show the distinction between the two of mentorship and sponsorship. So mentorship focuses on help that a mentor can provide directly, such as guidance, advice, feedback on skills and coaching, while sponsorship entails externally facing support, such as advocacy, visibility, promotion, and connection. So seeing sponsorship as a three-way relationship between the sponsor, the protege, and an audience helps to clarify the difference between a mentor, right, and a sponsor. So to simplify it even more, mentorship is private, sponsorship is public. So a lot of things that take place in a mentoring environment is somebody you're getting advice from, you're getting feedback, is someone that you tend to have a closer relationship with. It depends on what type of mentor, right? There are different levels of mentorship, but it's mainly things that are happening in a private setting, those conversations and what it looks like. Sponsorship is very much public facing. It's raising visibility. It's somebody who can talk about you when you are not in the room, someone who can raise your profile of who you are to individuals that are not aware. So really quick, I just want to take a poll to see who individuals who have experienced mentorship or sponsorship, where you are. I know that statistically, that women of color in particular, there usually is a lower rate of both mentorship and sponsorship. So just curious, just across the board, anyone in this group. And this should let you select multiple. So just want to get a feel for in this room where you are. Okay, I'm going to wait until it looks like we have mostly everybody. It's moving pretty quickly here. Like we have a couple more. I'll wait just a little longer. Okay. All right, I'm going to get ready to stop the poll. So here are our results, and I know there are a couple of you who didn't get a chance yet, but this helps us to see within this group where we are as it relates to mentorship and sponsorship. So we see we have a pretty low percentage of sponsors, 39% when it comes to mentorship. And so this is pretty on par. And so we're going to spend some time talking about ways that you can connect with a sponsor. And if it makes sense, I might even just looking at mentorship, might make some sense to also talk about mentorship as well, because both play an important role, but sponsorship can be especially helpful when it comes to preparing for the next opportunity. So I want to talk a little bit more about sponsorship and the ways that it can look, so that you understand how to articulate. And we'll talk about also asking for sponsorship opportunities. So when you have a sponsor, this is somebody who can amplify who you are, amplify what you've been able to accomplish, your voice. So the intended goal is to be able to create or increase perceivers' positive impression of the protege. And just so you know, this comes from a Harvard Business Review. And in my follow-up, I also will be providing you with links so that you can take a look at some of this information as well. And so in order for someone to be able to do this well, it has to be someone who's aware of your accomplishments and can speak to them. So I'm sharing some of these pieces, but also in your mind, I want you to be thinking about who is someone, if there is someone that can do some of these things on your behalf, even though we're going to talk about preparing for that process. But just to start to get your mind going and thinking through this. This is someone who can also boost who you are, right? Increasing others' expectations of you and your readiness for advancement. So somebody who can speak to your potential, right? They understand that about you, they're confident in being able to do that. And so if others, they may not know very much about you, but they have that opportunity to be able to share. There's an individual that is going to write letters of recommendation for you, would nominate you for opportunities that you may not even know about. And again, when you're not in the room, this is someone who is going to be able to speak to the future potential that you do have. Connecting, someone who can connect you with other individuals, especially when it comes to positional power. They can serve as a link to connect you with individuals or bring you into different meetings, opportunities, conferences, and they can help to increase the way that other people perceive you and your visibility overall. And I cannot emphasize the importance of this last one enough. Defend. This is somebody who, if there has been something that's said about you, or people have these certain thoughts, they have the ability to either neutralize some of those things or to be able to reverse things or speak to uncertainty. people may have, it may not even be anything that's very like extremely bad, but in a room where people may just not be quite sure, there are individuals that can help along the way to say, hey, here's what I know about this individual, or can speak the opposite of something negative that has been said, or if there has been a mistake or different things that have been made, that is able to bring some context and some understanding and to expose how what is being said is being harmful to you as an individual. So these are some of the different sponsorship tactics, understanding the intended goals and examples of how this could look. So with that in mind, asking for a sponsor is important because, like I mentioned, the statistics, actually having a sponsor, and we see even from the poll, there are not necessarily a lot of people who do have a sponsor just yet. And so we can't really wait around for it, because especially if, as a person of color, I can attest to, it doesn't necessarily always come. And so there are steps and different things that can be done in order to facilitate the opportunity to connect with a sponsor. And so I think I see some things coming in the chat too. I'll pause a little bit near this section to go back to make sure that I'm catching some of those things too. So preparation. The first thing is being able to understand and clearly articulate your purpose for asking, like why you would want a sponsor. This is why what I mentioned in the beginning, that foundational work is really important, because if you can't really articulate where you're wanting to go and the why behind it, you're not prepared to ask for a sponsor. So that first step is important, to do that groundwork, that you can articulate why, the direction you're wanting to go in, and why this would be important for you. You also want to identify who would be a good fit as a sponsor. So if you have that first part down, there are two key areas. If you haven't heard of Carla Harris, it's a wonderful resource I would encourage you to go check out later. She does a TED Talk on sponsorship, but she also has different articles and resources around this topic. And she talks about performance currency and relational currency quite a bit. And performance currency is that this is an individual who actually has seen you work. So they can speak to your accomplishments. They have an understanding of it. So this is a person who could be a good fit as a sponsor. If someone has not seen you work or doesn't know anything about what you've done, this is not somebody who, even if it's someone who you respect, you don't really have that ability to ask for that. Think of it as like a reference letter. You wouldn't ask someone to write a reference letter for you or to do a reference check for you if they don't really know anything about you, or they haven't seen your work ethic, or they don't have anything to speak to. Similarly, when it comes to a sponsor, it's important that you have that level of performance currency so that they can confidently be able to speak to you and about your skill sets. The other part is relational currency. You have to know who this person is. They have to know who you are, again, because they are putting their self on the line as well by speaking about you. And so in order for them to feel confident in doing that, there's a blend of both of these that need to be present. Now, relational currency is not necessarily at the same level like a mentorship. You may be very close with this individual. A sponsor, you may not be very close with this individual, but there is a level of a relationship where you both have an understanding of one another. And a person in this role, it could be a higher level role. Typically that happens in sponsorship. They're at a higher level, but there's also influential sponsorship. If they are influential enough and they are in spaces and rooms that you are not in, that also could be someone who could be considered a sponsor. So you want to identify somebody where there's a performance currency and there's relational currency. And sometimes you may have one that weighs higher than another, and that can help to bring some balance if one is a little bit weaker. But what you should remember is that if you don't have either one of these, it doesn't mean that it's a lost cause. It means that it's an opportunity to start developing some of these pieces. Similarly to the understanding, being able to clearly articulate your purpose for asking, if you feel like you're stuck in that space, that's also an opportunity to look for a mentor. because a mentor can help you through that process, or connecting with a coach can connect you through that process. So with performance currency and relational currency, if you know someone who has that, you've assessed the relationship, it's good, you're ready to move on to asking them. If you don't have that with them, then it's time to take a pause and look at how can you start to develop some of these things in an authentic way. In a way where it's someone who you respect, it's someone who you think would be able to speak to these areas. And now you just need to actually be able to share with them, like, here's some things I'm working on, to start to let them know, here's the direction you want to go in. So you're not necessarily asking them to be a sponsor yet, but you are starting to lay the groundwork so that they understand who you are, the direction you're wanting to go in. And it's really important that it's authentic to your purpose and the direction you want to go in order for it to be fruitful. So you've assessed it, you have an understanding, you're ready to move forward with asking. At this point, you're wanting to share with this person the concept of sponsorship. I know some people wonder, like, can I actually use sponsorship? Like, yes, you can use sponsor. So sharing with them the concept. So doing your research on it too, to be able to speak to it as it relates to the area you're interested in, making a distinction between mentorship, of course, in an organic way, being able to talk through that, and sharing your purpose behind why you're asking for them to be a sponsor. So again, the prerequisite though is you already have this relational currency, right? And performance currency before you get to this point. And then being able to provide tangible examples of what sponsorship could look like. This is going to give you insight. They may say yes, especially if you've done this pre-work, you're most likely to get a yes. If for some reason you don't get a yes, it also is helpful, because you can ask the question of, thank you for your honesty, and what is it that maybe, is causing you to not feel like this is something you wanted. It may be a lack of confidence, it may be a lack of information that they know. So either way, you're gaining information and you're learning from the process. Let me pause here on sponsorship and see if there are questions that are coming up on this topic in particular. And if you need to unmute as well, feel free to do that, because it's hard for me to see all of the questions. Okay, so I'm seeing one about, should a manager be a sponsor? It depends. A manager can be a sponsor, especially if they are in alignment with the direction you're wanting to go in, because a big part is you're looking at your trajectory as you're making this decision about who would be a good sponsor. If your manager is in a role that aligns with the trajectory that you're interested in, and they have the influence in those spaces or can connect you with individuals, a manager certainly could be a sponsor. If you have that, they should be able to see your performance currency, right? And you have that relationship, hopefully. So that it can be the case. Sometimes it is someone who is not in a managerial role over you at all, especially if the direction that you're interested in going in is not, they're not really in a place that they can do that. I know some people where I've worked with them and they've had questions about sponsorship, they're wanting to go a totally different direction, or their manager may not necessarily have the level of influence that would help them to get to that next step. So a manager is not inherently a good sponsor, but they could be. It just depends on the direction you're wanting to go in. What is their influence? And do you feel like you have the performance and relational currency that you would need with them? Okay, trying to see if I've missed anything else. I like that. You have a mentor, but you don't think she knows. Okay. Looking, are there any other, I'm scrolling back down to see if there's, what if you are attempting a career change? How do you, okay, career change. So I want to speak to this one really quick. This is a bit twofold. Sometimes there is a information gap space before the sponsor. You can do this two different ways. One is identifying people who are already within the space that you're interested in. So this piece has somewhat of a mentorship component, or more of an informational interview, right? When you're reaching out to people to gain different understanding and insight. to be able to learn. So this is laying the groundwork to be able to actually identify people who could be sponsors. So that first piece is actually learning about these different fields, people in them, having conversation, and from there being able to do, in some cases, if you have to get involved with a professional organization that's within that field. This is where I see sponsorship come up the most for people who have not made it into a direction that they're wanting to go in yet. They get involved in professional organizations where someone has an opportunity to see some of their skill sets and to know, and for them to be able to share, this is the direction I want to go in. And there's that opportunity to identify different sponsors. Another is if it's within an organization and it's not within your area, so to speak, there's an opportunity to still gain a sponsor within that environment. So let's use higher ed, for example. Let's say someone is working in student affairs and is really interested in doing work within academic affairs. And so the people in their area may not necessarily be within that direct reporting line that they're interested in, but there is a way to find someone who has influence still within that area. And this is where the connecting piece, right? So in this case, the tactic, remember the chart, you would be wanting to find your sponsor who's helping to connect you across into another area. This can be applied across different fields as well. If you can identify someone within your area that already is, then you don't necessarily have to go that professional development route, but that's one angle. And if it's even more nuanced, shoot me an email and I will be happy to have an even deeper dive conversation with you on that topic as well. Are there any other questions really quick around sponsorship? I want to make sure I do get a chance to hit on some of these practical details as well. Okay. How specific should you be in defining the type of sponsorship you would like? Some of this will come down to your relationship with the individual, but I would try to make it as simple as possible. So if you know that you are wanting to stretch to, let's say it's something that is around a bigger project or a certain managerial role, it's an opportunity for you to clearly articulate, here's the direction that I'm wanting to go in, XYZ. Here are the things, the tangible examples that I think would be helpful when you are meeting with the cabinet to be able to share XYZ about me. Would you feel comfortable being able to speak to highlight some of the things that I have accomplished? So I would say be as specific as your goal, like the big picture goal is for you. So is the thought behind sponsorship considered to be more of a specific plan or more of a purpose relationship than that of a mentorship? So yeah, so mentorship is about the private experience. A lot of, the relational piece is there for both, but mentorship is much more about feedback along your journey, somebody who's helping you. Sponsorship is very public facing. So it is a plan for somebody that's increasing visibility, is able to really speak to your accomplishments and making different connections. So there's relationship that is there. But so I would say, yes, it is a plan, but the plan is very much a public facing plan. I hope that's helpful. Okay, I've got to keep going because I want to make sure I get through some of these some of the basics, right, of what I mentioned. I know I told you all that we would talk about the application and interview process for this. So let's talk about some of these practical steps when it comes to actually applying for this opportunity. Remember that the job descriptions are research opportunities. So that is twofold. If you don't know exactly what you want to do just yet next, but you have different things that you know you would like to be able to engage in, things that are important to you, you can do certain keyword searches just to bring up different job descriptions and start to key in on what it is that is most fitting for what you want to do. So this is for those who don't know and you're trying to figure it out, you're preparing. Right now, you're taking a pause, you're doing some deeper reflection. That is perfectly fine. And this is a good way that you can spend time doing some of the research, because those job descriptions are going to give you some insight. And then also, if you know what direction you want to go in and you have a job that you're interested in, please know that the job description especially is a research opportunity, because hidden in that job description is the organization's points of pain, the things that they truly are looking for, if you can learn how to start to surface those things at a root level. So these next things, I encourage you not to just say, oh, yeah, I already know this, because I think that we all have the propensity to do this when it comes to applying for different roles, but we don't always do it. So as we go through these, just let it marinate, actually take it in and remember to practically apply it. So tailoring your application materials, doing that research, the mission and vision, actually taking the time to understand what it is. This is important on both sides, because this gives you insight, like, do you really even want to connect and attach yourself to the mission, but also so that you can clearly speak to it. As a hiring manager, multiple times, I've read so many cover letters, and it's very clear when something is generic. It becomes abundantly clear because you look at so many over and over again. And so I know a lot of people don't do this. So that's why I'm encouraging you. I know we all know it, but take the time to review the mission, the vision, really research and look at the job responsibilities, the job requirements, understanding from there, understanding what is the organization's goals and top tasks and skills of the job. So you want to take the time to actually write out those different pieces. When you are taking a look at a job description, these are the key areas that you're wanting to look at. If you want to screenshot this, you can. So for those of you that have a job that you're looking at right now, a project, whatever the opportunity is, go ahead and just take time to just think through these different pieces and answer these questions. Sometimes just writing it out helps to solidify it in your mind in a way that just makes even the next part of the process much easier. I say write it out too, versus typing it out, because there's actually something about writing that helps you with your memory in your brain. So I do encourage you, when actually preparing for a job opportunity, for the cover letter, you don't have to write out the cover letter, but for like the interview, the process when you're preparing and you're thinking through these different questions, to actually write it out. You'll be surprised at how much easier it will be when you're actually speaking in your interview, because writing it just has this powerful difference than typing, and how it solidifies in your brain. Your answers will come up more fluid, more easily. Tailoring your resume as a result of going through those different questions, it will, of course, help you to see, okay, now you've looked through those different requirements, you've seen the big major points, the goals. So now you can look at your relevant experience, the different bullet points you already have. Are there words that you should change? Are there ways that you can articulate it that speak exactly to what they were talking about? So, of course, going through that process of tailoring. Using action verbs. I'll be sharing this. If you want to screenshot it, you can. But this is really helpful for people to be able to align, see, understand where you are in your process. And then the importance of tailoring your cover letter, again, and using the introduction, being able to speak to the mission and vision, not just regurgitating it, but being able to speak to it. Two different things. It's one thing to say your mission is, XYZ. Another thing is to be able to speak to the mission, what it's about, to be able to align yourself with it. So again, that shows that you have done your homework. There's an understanding. to be able to speak to the posting and give those different explanations and about your different top skill sets. And so pivoting to interviewing, any really quick, any major question. I'm trying to keep us on a fast pace here to make sure I get through the rest of this material. Okay. And so you'll hear this in different ways, but ultimately you will see these are the three main questions that every role is trying to gain the answer to. So if you can remember that even every interview question in some way, shape, or form is routing back to these core questions of, will this person fit in our environment? And hopefully they understand culture add, but not all organizations do. And it's important to also know that when you're doing your research. Does this person already possess the skills needed for this job or the potential to learn them quickly? Will this person contribute to or detract from the mission of the organization? So if you spend some time, again, writing out some answers to these different questions and thinking about this when, ask kind of like that typical question of, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in this role? If you don't want to just answer this in a robotic way, but if you are able to speak to these areas, it's going to resonate all the more for that person or that panel, in some cases, who's interviewing you. These different questions that you might want to try to answer are for yourself, because remember, you are also interviewing them, is, do you feel comfortable, in the company or organization's environment? Can you imagine yourself there? Do you believe that they would value you and your contributions? Remember, you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. This can also help with some of the nerves, just to remember, like, this process is a true two-way street. Again, doing the pre-interview research, just like you do a lot of that with the job description, but knowing who the interviewers are, especially if there's more than one, having an understanding of what their backgrounds are is really helpful. It gives you insight into who different partners may be, what's important, what their background is. So that information is really helpful to understand the different initiatives and programs that they oversee, especially if it's a panel interview. It's giving you a lot of insight into what's most important. So don't just think of that as an afterthought. You see the names in that email, or, do your research, have a greater understanding of who those people are. And then last is just the interview strategy process. And many of you are probably familiar with this. I call it a Rolodex, some call it bookmarking, which is focused on thinking about all of the different areas and examples that fit what they're talking about, and having that repertoire. So it's easier for you to be able to pull those things up. So you've already looked at the bullet points in advance and you've written out multiple examples for each one. So when you're going through the interview, it makes it a lot easier to utilize the STAR method, right? Which is to be able to speak to the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So how are you connecting it to the company and the role? So the situation is providing the brief context for what you did. The task is outlining that the problem that you are able to oversee, or what task you completed. The action, right? The how, what went into it, what skills you utilized, and then speaking to the actual result. Plus anything around how does this connect to the role you're interviewing for. So just thinking through this process, when you have your different examples that you've gone through, if you want to practice ahead of time, if you're feeling nervous, you can utilize this method and think through this for once you're actually going through the process. So these are just some examples, right, of what that could look like. Let you kind of look at this briefly. We're not going to be able to do that last exercise, but I'll at least try to get you started, and you'll be able to do the second half on your own, because we're just coming down a little bit too tight. So actually, I think I should make a decision. I'll open it up for questions to see if there are certain questions that are coming up right now. And if there are, then I'll answer those versus starting the activity. If there aren't a lot of questions at this moment, then I will start the activity and then allow you to be able to finish it in your own time. So I'll take a look to see if there's any questions that are bubbling up right now. Okay, so I'm going to read this question out loud. How can you help make a job search feel sustainable? Scanning job alerts, prepping tailored materials, etc., is so important, but can also feel so time intensive. I feel like this becomes especially unmotivating when responses from potential employers can be so limited. Ooh, I hear you. Going through the job search process can be a lot, and there's so many different opportunities that may be seen, and trying to stay up on that and all the different materials can definitely be a lot. One of the things I encourage to simplify is to identify like what positions fit the best. So this is the pre-work part, is more so learning more about, and the Meaningful Work Kit is going to help you with this. So for those of you that weren't here earlier, I did forget to mention that I'm providing some take-home resources. One is like an intention setting worksheet. One is a Meaningful Work Kit that's focused on like your core values, your skill sets, and the type of workplace environment you thrive in, and it takes you through a process for that, as well as a couple additional, the present future exercise that we're not getting to right now for you to be able to do. So, utilize, I say that because for you, the main thing I think is actually tailoring down to a couple of positions at a time of what is most aligned. So the first thing you're wanting to do is find what is that level of alignment, and putting more energy in being able to connect and learn and have direct insights within that organization, because applying for multiple positions, yes, you should get your name in the hat, but it's much more precise to find a target of maybe like 5 things max at one time, like that you feel like are very much aligned, that you can put some time and energy in. 5 is even still a lot, but I say that because I know people are in different places at different times if you're looking for multiple things, but how can you actually do a map of identifying people within those different spaces? And from there, going through a process of creating your materials, but you actually have a connection within those environments that you've been able to learn and hear from. So this is good this is why it's best when you have a runway. If you don't have a runway, you're like, I need to do this now. Like I don't know the circumstances or what it may be. Creating a spreadsheet is really helpful for you to be able to rank, prioritize what is most important. I suggest having a spreadsheet anyways, where you have the day that you apply for something, around the deadline, the timeline, so you can see all of this and be able to cross it off along the way, but putting it in priority order and placing your time and energy in what is most important. That way, if you have time later, you can keep going down that line, but having this priority order with what is most in alignment with who you are, the direction you're wanting to go in, is a pathway that I would encourage you to do. It may feel like missing out and not applying for just everything that you're seeing at one time, because that can be very, like, the motivation can wane quickly, really fast. So actually taking the time to pour that energy into the ones that are most important. And if you have the runway, I really encourage building those connections in those spaces, because a lot of positions that people get aren't even always posted. And so if you learn to actually, in higher ed is a bit different. So if we're talking higher ed, they're always posted. But if we're talking beyond higher ed, they're not always posted. And so there's an opportunity to actually do that runway ahead. Within higher ed, I encourage to create those, conversations and relationships with people in advance, And something else you can do is when you're stepping into a new role that may not even have the things that you want, when you step into this role, and I do this all the time, I talk about my future. I talk about the things I want to do in the future so that it's already known in the beginning. And I talk about the things in the future. Of course, this has to be connected with the role. So if you're wanting to do something in a totally different field, like that's not the place, right, for it. But talking about what it is during that time helps to position you so that they have an understanding of like, this is your career trajectory within this field. That was a long answer. It took a lot of twists and turns because I wasn't sure exactly if you have time in advance, if it's something you're doing right away. I do hope that was helpful because I know I went in all different directions on that answer.
People want to know if you are available for coaching.
So currently my schedule is pretty full, I will say, just work-wise. However, I have so many different resources as a result of the course that I teach, the What's Next course. And if I know that you are in this session, I will provide some of those resources like that typically would be a part of my course that I'm charging for free of charge. Because you all are my people and I would be happy to do that for you. So I may not be able to do like a lot of one-on-one coaching sessions, although I love doing coaching sessions. Time just doesn't permit me right now, but I would love to be able to provide you with different resources. And I know an abundance of phenomenal coaches that I'm happy to connect you with that I can, and if you're thinking about your identity as a part of that, I also can make references based on like your concerns and who you'd want to be matched with. Okay. There may have been other questions I may have missed, but like I said, feel free to email me. I'll try to get you the resources that you need. Thank you all for your time. I definitely enjoyed being able to share with you all today. And I will be sharing the present future exercise with you. Now, I ask that you really do follow the directions because for the present future exercise to work, I always like to do it live. If you skip ahead to the next step, it won't work. So when you get it, follow the directions, just do the first step without peeking at the second step. And I promise you, it will be a positive impact for your life as an activity that you do. So thank you all. It was a pleasure to meet you and hope I get to see some of you around on campus. Take care. Bye.
People are still leaving, and we save the chat.
Wonderful.
Getting ready to save right now.
Should I stop the recording?
Yes, please. Yes.